What the hell? Why can't I hear anything in my headphones? That's creepy. Where's the music playing? Where's the music? The music doesn't play anymore. What the hell? This is not how I meant to start this show.
That's right. We want a country with, with due process that establishes whether or not even somebody who is a guest here, we don't want, a sort of arbitrary system where people's visas can be revoked without even regard to the underlying facts of the matter, or having no opportunity to challenge and say, no, I didn't do this, right? But that's what the due process piece is for.
I would just say at a very basic level, the
the music.
Constitution is a suicide pact if non-citizens have inalienable rights to come here and propagandize on behalf of jihadist groups, call for the violent overthrow of the United States, genociding entire peoples.
Look, when I was a kid, it felt like great men still walked the earth, right? It felt like we were still in an age of heroes. We had people like Ronald Reagan. We had people like Billy Graham. I mean, we had people like John Holmes. We had people like Ron Jeremy. Like, where have all the great men gone? Still in an age of heroes. Look, when I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful. A miracle. It was beautiful. It was magical. And all the birds in the trees, well, they'd be singing so happily, joyfully. They were playfully watching me. But then they sent me away to teach me how to be sensible, logical, responsible, practical. Then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable, clinical, intellectual, cynical. I mean, the world today, it's more rational than ever. It's more optimized than ever. It's more efficient than ever. But where's the magic? All right? Where is the enchantment? Where is the sense that like giants are walking the earth? All right? I don't see that anymore. And we finally got a president who's willing to make the tough decisions. And so we finally got a president who seems to me he would be willing to do what needs to be done. And that's to issue an executive order forbidding racism in escort ads. Like, for how long are we going to allow these escort ads to say no black men? I mean, is this who we are as Americans? Right? I don't think this is who we are. Right? This is not the America that I know. I don't know about you. I guess I'm naive, but like the blatant racism in way too many classified ads by escorts, it sickens me. And it's time somebody does something. I am calling right now, President Trump, stand up, issue an executive order against this, or have your Attorney General, Pam Bondi, investigate this problem. Because there is a rising tide of anger in this country that could just blow up into a revolution at any time. All right? If black men keep experiencing this kind of blatant discrimination, right? Isn't it about time that Johns are judged on the content of their character and not on the color of their skin? Like, why is it okay to say, I'm an escort and I don't want to work with black men? That's not the America that people fought and died for. I mean, we have left our kids a world without heroes, right? A disenchanted world, right? We got things optimized, rationalized, more and more efficient. But where is the magic? Where's God? Where's transcendence, right? The great men have been shoved off the stage. I mean, poor old Dennis Prager, he can't move from the neck down. Where have all the good men gone? Where are all the gods? Like, where's the streetwise Hercules to fight the rising odds? Isn't there a white knight out there upon a fiery steed? Like, I need a hero. I am holding out for a hero till the end of this show. Look, he's got to be strong. He's got to be fast. He's got to be fresh from the fight. Somewhere after midnight, right? There's someone reaching back for me, racing on the thunder, rising with the heat. It's going to take a Superman, right? I need a hero. right? Where are all the heroes? Like, are they up where the mountain meets the heavens above, where the lightning splits the sea? I could swear there's someone somewhere watching me through the wind and the chill and the rain and the storm and the flood. Like, I can feel his approach like a fire in my blood. So, yeah, I'm holding out for a hero. But we don't offer our children heroes anymore. When I was a kid, we had heroes. We had real men to venerate. We had Ronald Reagan. We had Billy Graham. We had John Holmes. We had Ron Jeremy. We had giants walking among us. Now, all these men have been torn down. We're told that Ronald Reagan was racially insensitive, that John Holmes had a connection to the Four on the Floor Wonderland murders, and we're told that Ron Jeremy was a rapist. And so, Ron Jeremy, January 2023, a judge found him mentally unfit to stand trial due to incurable neurocognitive decline, and he was released to a private residence in November 2023. I always thought Ron Jeremy would go out with a bang. Not like this. Not with a whimper. Not with incurable neurocognitive decline. I guess Hemingway was right. All stories are tragedies if you tell them honestly and all the way to the end. Look, I want to be clear. Nobody should be racist, and nobody should be rapist. Oh my God, Dan Turrentine is on. Laura, this is awesome. Our boy from the Two-Way Show.
Obviously, Bush was in office. He won handily in 2004. Now, but when Biden was in office, the right direction number was only 27%. So, Dan, they seem to like Trump so far. So is this really a Chuck Schumer problem?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to beat something with nothing. And the problem for the Democratic Party right now is we have no leadership. It's not just Chuck Schumer. It's also Hakeem Jeffries. And it was part of Kamala Harris's problem in November. We are caught between two competing forces right now. On the one hand, our base is still consumed with Trump derangement syndrome. Everything he does is awful. Everything he says is terrible. And they want to fight, everything. And of course, that's neither practical nor politically sound. On the other hand, we've alienated moderates because we failed the common sense test. We can't say even on 80-20 issues, like when the little boy was recognized for his battle with cancer, we can't applaud anything because our base may be upset. And lastly, we don't even offer solutions, right? The only unifying force in the party the last 9 years has been Donald Trump. And so I think what you have now is just this paralysis where we don't know where to turn. We don't know what to do. You saw that during the CR budget debate last week. And
wait, is he saying that he's holding on for a hero?
Brings you to 27, 29% approval.
Well, Don Lemon is making headlines after questioning the sincerity of black MAGA supporters.
I think there can be sincere Republicans.
But you can't be a sincere black Republican.
I don't think that you can be a rational MAGA, be black and be a rational MAGA person. I think you can be black and be a Republican.
I think they would find that very insulting.
Well, I mean, the truth is often insulting.
Well, he's insulting our intelligence. But, Dan, is that the way to bring African-American voters back, I guess, to the Democrat fold by saying they're stupid if they're voting for Trump?
Well,
I'm not following that.
We offended white working class voters. We offended Latinos by telling them that they didn't kind of know what was good for them and how to think. And I guess now we're going to the next demographic by telling, black men that they don't know what's good for them. I mean, this is part of our problem. We're incredibly patronizing to people. I mean, there are even people in the party who are rooting for Trump to fail, to turn around and say, I told you so. And I just can't think of a worse rallying cry than I told you so, right? We need to be out there telling, giving people reason to vote for us. It's what Donald Trump did. The secret to his success has always been his policies, not necessarily his personality.
All right. Dan, it's great to have you on. Thanks so much. And when we come back, Elon Musk.
Okay, so we're all holding out for a hero. But this needs to happen pronto. Right? No more jokes, right? Don't be racist, don't be rapist, don't facilitate mass murder to feed your drug habit. But can we not be mature about this and separate the artist and his art? I mean, the art that these men made will echo in eternity. maybe we need to give artists wider moral latitude due to the sensitivity of their perceptions. Ron Jeremy always struck me as possessing the soul of a poet. Like, I fear that we are not nurturing and we're not protecting our next generation of cinematic talent because there's just so much damn free material online for foreigners. I think Donald Trump needs to put tariffs on foreign porn to protect our domestic industry because, for all we know, China might well be exploiting the vulnerabilities of American males with free porn so that they can blackmail us and hack us and impurify our vital fluids. So let's make America great again. Our children need role models. Like, let's make it more difficult to access porn. Let's put tariffs on porn so people have to pay for it. Let's make people jump through hurdles to see the porn. Right? Let's make it much, 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 much more difficult for children to see porn. And let's have heroes again. Right? Let's start putting people, recognizing greatness. And I'm concerned now that when people hear the Ron Jeremy story, they'll think it's not worth striving for greatness because people will find some flaw and then they'll just tear you down just like they did to Ron. I'm thinking President Trump needs to issue a pardon to Ron Jeremy so that men can have hope again. Like, that would be real hope and change while Ron is still with us. Mr. President, before it's too late, act now. And the Justice Department needs to absolutely make it mandatory for any non-black sex worker that they should first serve 10 African-American gentlemen at a discounted rate, right, as a form of reparations for white slavery, right, before she can choose her customers, right? And the government should have an inspector on hand to make sure that she doesn't flinch and that she doesn't show any signs of racism, because that way, this is win-win, because that way Johns can sleep easy at night knowing that their escorts are not racist. So Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, she could offer escorts the equivalent of the good housekeeping seal of approval. And as a country, we'd get one step closer to Martin Luther King's dream. So do you read The Modern Mandingo? What a thoughtful essays there. And Lance writes, I once caught an escort who was a beautiful, exotic mixture of different ethnicities. She didn't have any restrictions for men on her ad other than being a gentleman. So since I have a nice voice and I speak proper English, she was very polite and kind during our discussion. Then I asked if she was open to blacks, and then the cymbal crashed. Her tone became more serious, and I was flooded with a barrage of questions as if I'd been detained by the customs department at the airport. I mean, this is no way for our African-American brothers to be able to purchase the genuine girlfriend experience. Like, he was asked, what race are you? How old are you? What profession are you in? What area do you live in? Right? She grilled me with even more questions about myself. I had no intent of acquiring her services. The interrogation would have killed any desire of mine had I intended to do so. She practically nailed 99 theses to this poor suffering man's chest, right? And this might have all been part of her avoidance plan to sway this African-American gentleman from visiting. I mean, what would have happened if he'd shown up and he'd not told her about her race? Right? Because of this guy's voice, she expected a professional white guy. So if she'd seen a well-dressed, well-groomed black man through a door's peephole, I mean, what would she have done? Would she have interrogated this gentleman? Would she have just ignored him? Like, who are the rotten black apples that make it bad for the rest of African Americans? Right? There are the cheapskates and the thieves. So some girls have noted experiences with certain customers that try to haggle down the price agreed to before meeting. And then others have had black men put the money on the dresser before the act, grab it, and rush out after the deed is done. Look, guys, this just makes everyone look bad. Well-endowed men. Some girls exclude black men because of their size. Disrespectful youngsters, right? Young black men have been stereotyped as being degrading to women both in and out of the bedroom thanks to certain parts of hip-hop culture and the images it portrays of how men treat them. Like, we should not be referring to women as bitches and hoes, right? So many young black men are way too rough and more demeaning than non-black men, right? And they're damaging the product. Then the majority of pimps are black men, and some of them don't want their girls to service other black men for fear that they might be lured away from the pimp or the escort business altogether. Right? That would be total loss of income for the pimp. So they want their escorts to service men who aren't black. but it's so racist. Right? It's black pimps who are largely behind the exclusion of black men. Sex workers don't do this job for the enjoyment of sex. It's a business. It's commerce. They're there to make money, generate revenue, right? And they don't want trouble. They don't want aggro, right? And so apparently, I don't get it. Discrimination laws don't apply, and apparently escorts is perfectly legal, is it, to refuse service to anyone they choose? But this sort of discrimination, this is what African American men face on a routine basis, right? The denial of basic sexual pleasure from the highest quality escorts. And they deny this to black men who bear no malicious intent towards anyone, sex worker or not. Like, what the hell? So I went over to Girls Ask Guys. There are more complaints about all this racism among escorts. So Mr. Oracle says it's less to do with racist views and it's more about culture. So why do so many black female escorts have a rule about no black men? All right, is that self-hating, or are they just acting in their own best interests? So in a black culture, urban hip-hop culture, culture where getting respect is an important keystone, giving respect is looked down on, especially for women. So women are routinely degraded, disrespected, and violence against women is accepted and even glorified. And when dealing with that honest-to-goodness, heart-of-gold whore, many black men feel like they have every right to treat them badly. Right? This is not gentlemanly. This is not chivalrous. And look, this is all very sensitive because I had a chivalrous weekend in Las Vegas about 20 years ago. It was a weekend of courtship. It was a weekend of mutual respect and open hearts. It was a glorious time. We went to dinner. We went to an award show. We got to know each other. It was just the highest quality social intercourse. It was very chivalrous. I was like a knight on a white steed. Lovely, lovely time. Such beautiful memories from our chivalrous dates. And then this woman just hit me up. But she's apparently now, I don't even know how to say this. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by my reaction. So she's married now. She's not a dom. She's just a connoisseur of fine diapered men. And so she has a personal fun channel that's very educating about men who like to be in diapers. And so there's diaper in a screen name. And I didn't answer back. Like, I was so appalled by the whole diaper fetish that I didn't answer her. And she's married now. Why do I have to be so? What would you do if someone hit you up and they're now making their living from serving the diaper fetish community? So this bloke, Mr. Oracle, went to college to be an audio engineer. And he says that hip-hop shows typically require triple the insurance, at least double the security, and there are always multiple incidents every show. Right? They're all heavily influenced by urban hip-hop culture where respect of others is rarely given, where there's always an adversarial attitude towards authority, where violence is used to solve even the smallest of problems or perceived slights, all in the name of respect. So the open market responds to these issues by charging more for the venue, requiring more insurance, requiring more security, requiring an on-site medical staff and sworn police officers. Right? It's not that the free market is racist. Right? They don't charge extra for reggae acts, jazz acts, or 50s, 60s oldies acts with mostly all black performers. But experience taught them that dealing with the black urban culture in rap comes with higher risks, and so the prices go way, way up. Prostitution is equally a free market. It is likewise responded to the higher risk of dealing with men of this culture with its own rules and responses. Well, it's unfortunate that so many fine African-American gentlemen, like really upstanding Johns, who should be judged on the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, they just get falsely grouped in with these problem elements. But apparently business is business, and risk versus reward has to be observed. I think we need an executive order.
And of course, menacing and threatening, probably committing crimes in the course of obstructing basic life on a campus. And all of that, according to open source materials, this guy has engaged in. And you can be sure that the government has vastly more information than the public is looking at to assess what this person's involvement is in effective.
Look, Mahmoud Khalil didn't do nothing. He was a good boy. He was getting his life together. He was about to release his first rap album.
Engaging in information operations on behalf of jihadist groups. In terms of the law itself, which is almost secondary from just the basic principle of you don't have a right to come here and advocate for groups that want to destroy us. If you look at the INA, Immigration and Nationality Act, and you look at who's inadmissible, well, lo and behold, people who are parts of totalitarian parties, people who have been associated with terrorist organizations, and intends while in the United States to engage solely, principally, or incidentally in activities that can endanger the welfare, safety, or security of the United States. These are inadmissible categories of people. So I think almost no one is operating in good faith in trying.
So pretty much everyone I know who's even left of center thinks that we're getting dangerously close to fascism, which I find the most ridiculous thing in the world, because if we were dangerously close to fascism, they'd never be speaking out. You can't have it both ways. You can't seriously claim that we're dangerously close to fascism and you feel totally free speaking out about how we're dangerously close to fascism. If we're dangerously close to fascism, you wouldn't be speaking out because you'd be scared to death. So don't give me that crap.
To defend this guy, and I will point out an irony here. This goes for Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats. I think it was the Judiciary Committee. Maybe it was the Democrats writ large, but I think the Judiciary Committee. And many of the others who are defending this guy and feigning concern for rights, many of the people on the left defending him are the same people who were for imposing a mass federal government-led censorship regime against American citizens for clearly protected political speech. But they're up in arms over the fact that non-citizens can't propagandize on behalf of jihadist groups and ought to be kicked out of the country. You know, in terms of the slippery slope argument here, one other point that I would make is, you know, if you assume that when the Democrats are in power, let's say they say that an Israeli who is against the quote unquote two-state solution and advocating against it and for annexation of lands, let's say that a Democrat says that's affiliating with dangerous Israeli parties, and those people should be inadmissible. Well, guess what? The slippery slope, the Biden administration already went down that slope. They imposed sanctions on Israelis who dared to oppose the administration's policies with respect to creation of a Palestinian Arab state. They threatened to impose those sanctions on Israel's own elected leaders. So we're already there. If you think that that might be what's coming, we're already there in terms of where the left is. And ultimately, this comes down to who are your representatives and who do they view as our allies and our enemies. I think the notion of slippery slope, don't want to set precedent, et cetera, it's basically gone in our system. Democrats eviscerated it, and these are the new stakes. But again, I go back to the basic point of if you want to survive as a country, you don't invite people in who want to destroy your country and advocate on behalf of your adversaries, for whom psychological operations, information warfare is a key tactic they engage in and a key part of their overall grand strategy. Last point I'll make is I do wonder if social media is amplifying the voices who are on the Mahmoud Khalil side on this, because I have to believe that this is something that's like a 90-10 issue or an 80-20 issue at worst among Americans. But the left is obviously very good at organizing and propagandizing. And so I wonder if they are louder than they are large in terms of who is actually on this guy's side against the administration.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here, except, outside of the legal ramifications here, which have been well discussed. I think, I've been an advocate for being even more judicious and stringent on the type of people that we accept into the United States to get visas and green cards. Because
look, stop looking at Amber Duke that way. She's married. So don't look at her that way. Stop it. Let's show women respect. All right, Christopher Caldwell. I'm such a fan of Christopher Caldwell. I will subscribe to any publication that he writes for just to get access to his thinking. He's got a long essay out in the latest Claremont Review of Books. So I spend $28 a year or $30 a year to subscribe to this, largely to read Christopher Caldwell. And so he is talking about Jean-Marie Le Pen, the French right-wing leader who died a few months ago. And he says, the amazing thing about Donald Trump's arrival in office for his second term has been the sheer consequentiality of it. And so it just, I don't get why everyone I know, left of center, is just freaked out and thinking we're marching towards fascism. I don't get why they just don't find it funny. I mean, charismatic leaders like Donald Trump inevitably just crash and burn, right? He cannot maintain this mania for an indefinite period, right? We all know that this Trump phenomenon is going to come to just a brutal and horrible end. But why don't they see the humor or the amazing ride that we're on? And they don't. They're just freaked out. And I am surprised by how consequential the second term has been. I am pleasantly surprised by Trump too. Still pleasantly surprised. And dreams that were alive to many Americans just 6 months ago, transcending binary sexuality, are now dead and discredited. Right? So are the state mechanisms by which such dreams are imposed on normal people, like affirmative action, speech codes. Right? Revolutions often fail. They often turn dangerous, but they are hard to undo once the spell of the old regime has been broken. The spell of the woke regime has been broken. The spell of the DEI regime has been broken. The spell of affirmative action has been broken. I don't think we're going back. And it is glorious. I'm loving it. Wall Street Journal. Trump administration expands fight with big law firms to DEI practices. Right? Remember, DEI means we discriminate against white people and straight people and men. Right? DEI means we're anti-white, anti-male, anti-straight. Right? That's what it means. So Trump administration is fighting against big law firms that discriminate against white people, straight people, and men. Right? I think this is fantastic. This is a dream. Right? I was holding on for a hero, and now one's arrived. Mr. Donald J. Trump, President Trump. Thank you. Thank you. Just every day there's a new bracha. Are we worthy to live in such extraordinary times? Trump administration has sent letters to 20 major law firms saying it has concerns about their diversity programs and employment practices. Right? And what's glorious is that they seek more information. Do you know that is about that's the deadliest weapon that lawyers have, right? When they have the right to seek more information, they can turn your life upside down. They can subpoena your emails, your diaries, your journals, your text messages, right? They can just ransack your life. And now, right, big law, which is overwhelmingly on the left, right, been overwhelmingly fighting the causes of the left, fighting against the first Trump administration. All right, so they're no friends of mine. All right, they're anti-white, anti-male, anti-straight. Right, they have tried to hurt people like me for as long as they could. All right, they would not allow any of their employees to argue for the traditional definition of marriage when that was still up for grab before the ridiculous, insane, satanic Obergefell ruling that mandated the legality of gay marriage in every state. It's just such an incredible state of degeneracy. It's such a serious state of pause that there is a very solid Torah-based reason that this country is now so degenerate and so paused that a God-fearing Jew can no longer live here, right? From the perspective of a God-fearing Jew, right, much better that you live in Putin's Russia than in such a degenerate country as the United States, where you've got this incredibly horrifying thing, same-sex marriage, and big law would not allow like anyone in their firms to try to defend traditional marriage. Like big law did everything they could to F over the traditional definition of marriage, right? They did everything they could to promote the pause, to promote anti-white, anti-male, anti-straight bigotry and active discrimination. And so I think it's fantastic that the Trump administration is pushing back. Thank God, right? They're demanding more information, right? Because these firms are actively discriminating and behaving in a bigoted and hateful fashion towards white people, towards men, and towards straight people. So these letters have gone to many of America's biggest firms, Kirkland and Ellis, Latham and Watkins, Simpson Thacher, and Skadden Arps. Right? So these latest inquiries come from the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which has traditionally been a stronghold of the left that has been using every apparatus of power that they can, particularly with the EEOC, to investigate the most private parts of our life so that they can make our lives more legible, so the government has greater ease and ability to regulate us, to research us, to interrogate us, to track us, to tax us, to punish us if we don't go along with the pause. All right. So finally, the EEOC is being used on behalf of healthy Americans instead of the sickest, most pause-ridden Americans. This is beautiful. Right. So first, the White House issued executive orders targeting 3 major left-wing law firms fighting for the pause, fighting against white people, straight people, and men, Covington and Burling, Perkins Coie, and Paul Weiss. Right? Now the EEOC is seeking years of information about the firm's hiring practices. Well, I can tell you what their firm's hiring practices are. They are discriminating actively and hatefully against white people, against men, and against straight people. Right? Because they have all these programs boosting minorities and other underrepresented groups, right? Supporting the pause, discriminating against all that which is healthy, happy, and holy. And the commission has created an email address where whistleblowers can send information about potentially unlawful DEI practices at law firms, all right? Big law, overwhelmingly on the left, overwhelmingly consistently discriminating against white people, men, and straight people. This is fantastic. There's now an email address for whistleblowers. Right? President Trump said in his first week of office he aimed to root out illegal DEI practices. Right? DEI means we actively discriminate against white people, men, and straight people. Right? He instructed each federal agency to identify the most egregious and discriminatory DEI practitioners among companies, nonprofits, foundations, private sector organizations, and to recommend as many as 9 targets for potential civil investigations. All right, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that universities cannot use race as a factor in admissions, and virtually all of our major universities are ignoring what the Supreme Court ruling said. Our law schools overwhelmingly are defying the U.S. Supreme Court. So let's investigate them. Let's demand information from them. Let's make them sweat. Let's cut off their funds. Let's tax their endowments. Right? These are organizations overwhelmingly aligned with the left, actively, hatefully, and in a bigoted and discriminatory way, working against the interests of healthy people, married people, traditional people, white people, men, straight people, right? They all get screwed over in this pause-ridden left-wing crusade. Glad to see Trump pushing back. So Attorney General Pam Bondi is going to submit a report with a list of potential private sector targets to the White House in May. So the EEOC letters to the firms ask about their specific hiring initiatives, their public statements about goals to when they say to increase the number of women and people of color, what they mean is to decrease the number of white people, men, and straight people. So here are the law firms: A&O, Shearman, De Beauvoir and Plimpton, Cooley, Freshfields, Brokehouse, Derringer, Goodwin, Proctor, Hogan, Lovells, Kirkland and Ellis, Latham and Watkins, McDermott, Will, Emery, Milbank, Morgan, Lewis and Bockius, Morrison and Foister, Perkins Coie, Reed Smith, Ropes and Gray, Sidley Austin, Simpson, Thatcher and Bartlett, Skadden Arps, Slate, Meager and Flom, White and Case, Wilmer Ale. This is such great news. This is glorious news. Been listening to NPR. Nearly every story is about Doge. Doge invites stories from the left-wing media because it's going about things in a rather chaotic fashion, and it's not entirely clear that Elon Musk's private sector strategies are a good fit for government. So Steve Saylor's got in his latest post, the rare earth bubble is over. 2024 global revenue from rare earth was less than $4 billion. Right, you hear a lot about rare earths these days. The total global energy market was over $4 trillion, but rare earths just $4 billion. So why is everyone talking about rare earths? Why are we reorienting our foreign policy around rare earths? We're not reorienting our foreign policy around rare earths, Steve Saylor. Right, just because a rare earth deal with Ukraine was a big item in the news for the past 2 weeks doesn't mean it has any significance. Rare earths aren't rare. They're just environmentally devastating. So it was just a way for Trump to claim a win and claim that we're going to get some of our money back from Ukraine. Doesn't have significance. So Saylor writes, why cutting federal spending isn't like cutting Twitter spending. Elon Musk has not overcome a fundamental problem with the difference in incentives between for-profit and government managers. So when Elon Musk overpaid for Twitter, he immediately fired about 80% of employees and did not collapse Twitter, right? Because with the help of some expert Twitter insiders who turned coats and became Musk loyalists, right, Twitter was able to survive with only about 1/4 as many employees. But they were the right quarter of the original workforce. Now, Musk is trying to apply the same method to the federal government agencies. How does it work with the federal service? Right, you're not allowed to do that much with federal employees. It's hard to fire them. And the highest paid federal employees make generally less than $200,000. So much of their compensation comes from having a lot of people working for them. So why would you want to betray your loyal underlings by telling Elon Musk which ones you could actually do without if Elon is not going to make you substantially richer for it? So instead, if Doge tells you to fire 500 people, the obvious step is sabotage. Make Doge look bad by firing the 500 people who do the work that to the press and the public seems the most obviously valuable. After all, what does Doge know about how things work in countless agencies? Not much. It's almost as if Doge was not carefully planned ahead of time to focus first on the worst examples of waste and fraud, which allows bureaucrats to easily sabotage its efforts with bad PR. Trump often cancels Doge's worst mistakes, but not until after Doges dream up why actually it wasn't a mistake, it was just 4D chess. Right? Enormous amounts of thought and political capital need to be expended in changing the incentive structure to make these government cuts smarter. Instead, Doge flails and steps on every upside-down rake of a PR fiasco that bureaucrats have carefully laid in its path. All right, thoughtful analysis there from Steve Saylor. But let's get back to Jean-Marie Le Pen. Christopher Caldwell with a long essay. What the hell are you making me log in again? Doggone it. Okay. I'm getting my act together. It's a very professional show.
Because traditionally our vetting system has been incredibly broken, where we don't ask basic questions or really look deeper into ideology as a factor when deciding who to admit into the United States. And this guy seems like an obvious test case for that question.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Amber that the question is not, should this guy be deported? The question is, why is this guy in the United States, and why are so many people
right.
obviously support the enemies of the United States being invited into the country, right? But with that, we're going to go ahead and transition to the next segment, which is related in this.
Transition, you're triggering me, bro.
Welcome to a special edition of Jesse Waters Prime Time. I'm Judge Janine Pirro. There's a new sheriff in town.
No, we're not going there. All right.
Certain sense, it's continuing ramifications from those protests from last summer at Columbia and other universities. So the Trump administration is withholding $400 million in grants. Again, that's about half of what we give generally annually to Columbia in grants alone, and I'll get to that.
So is this shirt just too unbuttoned? Because I stand before you an unbuttoned man, right? I stand before you emotionally and intellectually naked, but I'm also a very modest man, a very respectable man, and I've gotten some negative feedback that my shirt is way too open. I might have misjudged some things. So the White House is sending a message to illegal aliens. Okay. The age of Le Pen. So what was this regime? What was it all about? Meaning the dominant left-wing regime that runs almost all of our institutions, not just in the United States, but also in Canada, Australia, and Europe. So the life of its most dogged and enduring opponent, the French populist leader Jean-Marie Le Pen, suggests an answer. He died in January at age 96, 2 weeks before Trump returned to office. Half a century ago, Jean-Marie Le Pen called for an uprising against a dawning era of human rights, abortion, sexual liberation, transnational governance, and above all, mass migration. So I remember when I was on the radio, on K-High radio, and the more insecure I would get about my voice, the more tense I would get. And then the more tense I would get, the more my vocal cords would get squeezed. So I was less able to project my voice. So I'd have to get closer to the mic, and my boss would hear me, and he says, "You sound like you're drowning." So thank God I got some voice lessons. I sure hope I don't sound like I'm drowning anymore. So Jean-Marie Le Pen won the near-unanimous loathing of his country's journalists and intellectuals who accused him of racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism. Wait, that's the same for Donald Trump. Is there any right-wing leader who hasn't received the near-unanimous loathing of his country's journalists and intellectuals? Is there any major right-wing leader in an advanced economy who has not been accused of racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism? Jean-Marie Le Pen was the most despised major politician in the West, rivaled only by Britain's Enoch Powell. His general vision, which passed through Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul and Brexit on its way to Donald Trump, has triumphed. Right? Jean-Marie Le Pen has triumphed. His vision has triumphed. So what did he get right? What did he get wrong? Christopher Caldwell interviewed him. So he was a populist. He was born in Brittany, France in 1928. He was a nationalist. And the party that he created, that's been taken over by his daughter Marine Le Pen, is now the biggest political party in France, commands a solid third of the vote, and it is kept out of office only by ever more elaborate deals between the establishment parties. Doesn't this sound like the efforts made to keep Donald Trump out of office, to keep the alternative for Germany out of office? Is that my hero, Stephen Miller? I'm a big Stephen Miller fan.
And for taking them in, saying, "We will not forget."
This was one of the most successful counterterrorism operations in American history. Tren de Aragua was sent here by a foreign government. They are an agent of the Venezuelan government that has been sent to the United States. That is what triggers the predatory incursion language in the Alien Enemies Act. What you saw was every arm and agency of this nation's homeland security apparatus working together in perfect unison to secure the homeland.
And these are some of the most bloodthirsty monsters you can find.
These are monsters who tortured, raped, and murdered a 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungray. They murdered 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley.
Okay, so what did Jean-Marie Le Pen stand for? He was a nationalist. He had three big causes. He opposed communism, right on that. He had an imperial vision of France, neither right or wrong. And he fought immigration, and that was a noble fight, and he did so almost alone. In 1972, France enacted its Plevin Law, meant to fight racism. It was France's equivalent to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but there was a twist. France's principle of non-discrimination applies not only to races and sexes, but also to citizenship status. That newly arrived immigrants have the same rights to benefits, housing, and so on that French citizens did. Right? This was a program to melt the French nation into a planetary magma. And so you cannot argue for any limits on immigration without being accused of racism. But it's pretty much the same in Australia, New Zealand, England, France, Germany, everywhere in Europe, the United States, right? You can't argue for any limits on immigration without being accused of racism. So the perfectly innocent expression of preferring one's own nation has taken on sinister associations in French public debate, the way that states' rights did in ours. So the arrival of just a few million immigrants by the late 1970s struck Jean-Marie Le Pen as a demographic cataclysm. His alarm changed to despair as the migrant population mounted. He thought feminism played a subtle role in it. Right? He had 3 accomplished daughters. He shared many of feminism's aspirations and assumptions. Women often concentrate better, work better than young men, but the consequences of this choice are fatal to bring in all these immigrants. He meant fatal for survival. We can survive without female technicians. We cannot survive without mothers. Damn, based and red-pilled. So, in the winter of 1984, Jean-Marie Le Pen was invited onto a popular TV show, Moment of Truth, in France, for an extensive interview with the country's top journalists. You'll be shocked to learn it was an ambush. The financial writer Jean-Louis Sauvin-Schreiber peppered Le Pen with racist statements drawn from various sources, many of them years old, none of which had been verifiably made by Jean-Marie Le Pen himself, but all of which involved a person who could be tied to him in some way. So for decades from now, I'm going to be asked about things that Glib Medley, Elliot Blatt, Art Bell, and Don Willis have said. And I'll have to say, look, they were speaking for them. I'm all about the radical love and inclusion. So this is what the news media do in France and in the United States. I'm going to give you a chance to make your thoughts clearer. I quote, "In the course of history, 2 people have claimed to belong to a superior race, the Jews and the Germans. It didn't work out well for either of them. In other words, Nazism, Judaism." Le Pen looks sincerely puzzled. That passage comes from where? It's from your own weekly, June 30, 1983, under the signature of André Figueras. Well, why don't you ask Mr. Figueras? And it went on like this all night. So a member of his party said something critical about Jews. A member of his party said something that was politically incorrect. And Jean-Marie Le Pen has to answer for it. So there was something scurrilous about this media tactic, right? Drawing up a list of things for which a dissident, for which Mr. Le Pen is not responsible, and then calling on him to disassociate himself from them. So you can't play that game. Don't play the disavow game, right? So the French noticed, just as Americans have noticed and Australians have noticed, that our elite journalists consider themselves entitled to drive dissidents out of public life on the flimsiest of accusations. Holding a politician to account no longer requires proving wrongdoing. It was enough to assert that he had refused to disassociate himself from a misdeed that he had not committed, or that he had shared a platform with somebody he didn't know. Oh my. So Jean-Marie Le Pen was a formidable orator. He was a formidable organizer. He was a formidable showman. He launched perhaps the most important worldwide political movement of populism of the last 50 years. And at his death, French newspapers summed up his career with a single incident when he described the Holocaust as a detail. Well, guess what? Right, what's important to one group is simply a detail to another group. So it wasn't shocking and it wasn't anti-Semitic if in one particular interview, Jean-Marie Le Pen described the Holocaust as a detail. The detail was the word Le Pen used when he thought his interlocutors, his journalists who were going after him, were missing the forest for the trees. French journalists were eager to know if Le Pen embraced Holocaust revisionism. And this is what he is best known, right? He created the most significant political movement of the last 50 years, and he is most famous for describing the Holocaust as a detail in one particular interview. So for French elites and for American elites, protecting society against right-wing populist movements justifies any tactic. Right? Extremism in defense of taking down Donald Trump or Jean-Marie Le Pen is perfectly justified. So we have all these taboos erected around beautiful causes, universally deemed worthy, right? Creating our most powerful social institutions, right? And these institutions attract people who want power. And the more irreproachable the cause, the stronger the attraction. So Holocaust remembrance in France and civil rights in the US, right? Wonderful opportunities to weaponize our most sacred institutions against political challenges and populists, to try to discredit the moral core of the populist critique. But what Trump supporters and Jean-Marie Le Pen supporters noticed was that his adversaries would stop at nothing to prosecute him out of the public square. So he had all these NGOs suing him in France, using the devastating effectiveness of guilt by association. So Le Pen was held responsible for anything that another member of the National Front said. So ordinary people could then be held responsible for any part of their political outlook that overlapped with Le Pen. So when communism ended, conservatives in France settled on immigration as their country's main problem. And so now Le Pen, who was right about communism, was also right about immigration. He was the founding father of the immigration reform movement. And so the main business of France's media and political establishment became the protection of their privilege and their position through the construction of further taboos. So after Jean-Marie Le Pen died, the New York Times wrote that he had been considered so odious that many opponents refused to debate him. Right? One could just as easily say he was so formidable in debate that his opponents invoked or invented his odiousness to avoid humiliation. He was more like Italy's Silvio Berlusconi than Donald Trump. He had a deep classical education. He was at ease in his country's literature and culture. He spoke an elegant French. He resembled Charles de Gaulle. And when he made it into the final round of elections in 2002, Jacques Chirac, his rival, said he would not debate him. I cannot accept the banalization of intolerance and hate. Right, so this is a national triumph of the cordon sanitaire, right? Strategy refusing all recognition and all cooperation with Le Pen. So it was first proposed by socialists in 1987, and it's pretty much how advanced economies deal with populist movements. Right, so you single out all sorts of elected political representatives and then exclude them from government institutions. Right, so this will win short-term tactical gains for the establishment, but this will come at the cost of validating the ideological vision of the populism of the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, the Trump-era Republican Party in the United States, the National Front in France. So in all of these places, there's always one penultimate period where the establishment Conservative Party gets one last chance to prove itself to voters alienated from the political system, and then it betrays them. So it came from the United States with George W. Bush, came for France in 2007 with Nicolas Sarkozy. And in Germany, right, that moment appears to be coming now for Friedrich Merz and his Christian Democrats.
But in grants alone, so where the Trump administration is withholding half of Columbia's grants, which will make a serious dent in their budget. They are dependent on these grants. And the grounds on which they're withholding those funds are Title VI grounds. So the Civil Rights Act has multiple titles. Many of you have heard of Title IX, right? Some of us have heard of Title VII in the employment context. This is Title VI. So this is applying to educational institutions. And the standard there is basically that there are certain types of behavior and action. I'm choosing my words really carefully here because speech alone is not enough. But certain types of actions that students can take against one another on a university campus where the university has an obligation to step in. And generally speaking, that's the threshold where a student is being harassed on the basis of race, religion, national origin.
Kip complains that when he listens to me, he never knows if he's hearing my thoughts or Grok's, or am I just echoing Mark Halperin or Christopher Caldwell? Where's the gold rope chain any self-respecting ex-porn journalist should be wearing? The gold should be vying with those pearly whites for my eye's attention. Ron Paul, Pat Buchanan, H. Ross Perot would have been great for America. Tribunals never work out well for the accused. Who knew that Fordy was such a Jean-Marie Le Pen fanboy?
And to a point where that's affecting his or her ability to take advantage of the education that he or she is paying for, right? So in this case, I want to be super clear. It is completely constitutionally protected in the United States, especially on a public university, but in most cases in private universities as well, because these are their speech codes and stuff that you sign on to as a student. It's completely fine to stand in the quad and scream that you hate Jews. Like that is a First Amendment protected activity in the United States. What's not protected and what may result in a school losing their funding is that the school has an obligation to prevent racially based harassment. So that has to come with an action. In this case, like following around Jewish students from class to class, screaming epithets at them, or preventing Jewish students from crossing the campus in order to get to their classes. So those are the kind of actions that go along with speech that then qualify for Title VI. So I think this is long overdue. I've advocated that funds be pulled from universities on a whole variety of grounds, this being one of them. I think there are ample other grounds to pull funds from universities, starting with the fact that basically every university is an open rebellion against the SFFA case in terms of admission and race-based admissions practices. Almost every school is practicing racially discriminatory admissions. So that's another reason for the Trump administration to pull funds. I'm sure they are working on that as well. There are additional reasons to pull funds.
It's glorious, right? Fund us, interrupt us. Like, pull the old funding and let's preserve and protect our vital, essential fluids and stop allowing them to be impurified by the pause. Right, let's stop funding the pause. The Jean-Marie Le Pen party is now run by his daughter, Marine Le Pen. She's in her 50s. She shares her father's skepticism of the elites, the EU, and immigration. And she also shares her generation's repugnance at the extremist tendencies of the 20th century French right. So she has set out to make the party less diabolical, particularly with regard to the Jews. And when her father engaged in one of his occasional provocations, she expelled him. And now, Holocaust historian and Jewish activist in France, Serge Glasfield, right, a long-time opinion leader for leftists in Paris, is backing Jean-Marie Le Pen's party. So the week Jean-Marie Le Pen died, The Economist ran a feature titled, How Extremist Politics Became Mainstream in France. Well, he was a populist, and his populism became outright dangerous to France's elite institutions, and the elites did everything that they could to freeze out the dissent. First, they used moral disapproval. Then they used litigation. Then they extended the definition of extremism to embrace the politics of 40% plus of the population. Right? If you're skeptical about immigration, you're an extremist. If you defend marriage is only between a man and a woman, you're an extremist. So eventually, voters come to think of populism, yes, the worst form of political uprising, except for all the others.
That have to do, just like I just mentioned, Title VII. The university is an employer. They're not allowed to discriminate as an employer, just like they're not allowed to now discriminate in admission. So, hiring a whole department, for example, on the basis of quote unquote diversity, is potentially illegal behavior. It is illegal behavior. It has been illegal behavior. It's never been legal to do that under Title VII employment law, and yet we've just had administration after administration that has turned the other way. So, universities fundamentally accept a lot of money. This is only grants. They're even more dependent on student loan funds, which is the Title IV funds that basically, again, every university, but basically Hillsdale, is completely dependent on subsidized student loans. So universities are incredibly vulnerable on this. This is just one of many grounds on which they can lose. I think this one was kind of the simplest and the easiest to kind of work through the administrative process on, but I would expect this to keep coming. I would expect on a variety of grounds, a lot of these grants to start being pulled, which I think is unequivocally a great thing. I don't know what the rest of you guys think about this.
So one thing that's notable also up front is that I think that the total outstanding potential grants to Columbia were something like $5 billion. So this is still a fraction, and we're talking $5 billion in a single institution. So you can imagine how significant this sort of policy would be to the extent it's pursued at all the schools that have conducted themselves like Columbia. Full disclosure, by the way, I'm a Columbia alum. 20 years ago, the campus looked exactly the same. There was Israeli Apartheid Week every single year. The Middle East Studies Department has been a hotbed of pro-jihadist activity since time immemorial. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was invited to come speak while I was a student at Columbia. So there's a long history of this beyond all the other, obviously, radical progressivism that the school has promoted for decades. And I would again say at a basic level, just like in the last segment, that you've no inalienable right to come to our campuses and comport yourself like Khalil. Why should we be underwriting campuses that are hotbeds of anti-Americanism that call for the destruction of Western civilization when those campuses are a very product of Western civilization? And by the way, at Columbia, there's a core curriculum where you have to read all of the Western canon. And you're going to invite people there or underwrite a school that then essentially protects as a class those who want to destroy that civilization. It's just utterly asinine. So I think this move was probably an initial shot across the bow. We've seen that Harvard has indicated that they're going to impose, it seems like, some kind of hiring freeze, that they're concerned about the potential monetary consequences of the radicalism they've allowed to fester. And the last point that I would make is the schools themselves are essentially engaging in or helping those conspiring to deprive the rights of other students to operate. It's not about speech, it's about action, ultimately, by not maintaining law and order on campuses. Conspiracy to deprive rights is exactly what the Justice Department went after Donald Trump over with respect to January 6th. Turnabout's fair play, and you could very easily see statutes just like that, and any creative or even not creative lawyer can probably figure out a way to turn it on these schools. And final point is just the foreign funding of universities is the next Rubicon that ought to be crossed. I think that truly mandating disclosure and transparency with respect to the foreign funding of schools alone might deter the foreign funders, that oftentimes you can link that foreign funding to the underwriting of the very radical activities and the passive response, to say the least, from the administrators and enforcement officers on these campuses. That's something that Congress ought to be focused like a laser on as well.
Yeah, I mean, Confucius Institutes during the first Trump admin, schools that had those were going to be stripped of federal funding under Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Biden reinstituted federal funding for schools that had Confucius Institutes, which are backed by the CCP. And I have not seen anything from the second admin on what they're doing about that issue, but you would think that and other sources of foreign funding, like Qatar is a big one in American universities. All
right, these are glorious, glorious days. Trump revolutionizes political communication. This is political scientist Charles Lipson writing in the Wall Street Journal. To an unprecedented extent, he and his cabinet are speaking directly to the voters, bypassing traditional media. Donald Trump has broken so much crockery so fast that one thing he is doing is underappreciated. Right? He's made so much news, it's hard to cover it. No administration has communicated with voters as often or as directly or as effectively as his. Right, not only are top officials on TV, social media constantly, they are bypassing all the usual media filters to do it. They do live interviews, podcasts, social media posts, videos. Every day, many senior officials appear on camera, controlling their message by doing live spots that cannot be edited. Their presentations are as blunt and as direct as their policies. Remember Vice President J.D. Vance's speech to a shocked Munich audience? So J.D.'s approach and that of the entire Trump team matches that of the boss, who clearly emphasized media savvy in choosing his cabinet and his White House aides. Right, this criterion is only second to loyalty to Trump and his agenda. The administration strategy takes full advantage of new communication channels. It plays down the mainstream media that routinely oppose Trump. Biggest advantage of this approach are greatest control over the message and increased effectiveness. Word comes directly from policymakers, not their spokesman or anonymous sources. Previous administrations only made their top officials available intermittently. Even telegenic presidents like Barack Obama were far less visible than Donald Trump. Cabinet secretaries and White House aides typically spoke to journalists behind the scenes without attribution. Donald Trump chose senior officials who could sell the administration's message to voters. They have extensive on-air experience, and it shows. They consider media appearances a vital part of their jobs, not a distraction. They want to do interviews, and they want to do them live when possible, because the media is going to have less ability to edit you. They deliver their message with enthusiasm and without apology. They are willing and eager to confront opponents head on. Donald Trump provides the model. He answered more than 1,000 questions in his first month, 7 times as many as his predecessor over 4 years. Right? Biden's visibility declined in tandem with his health. Trump's goal is far more ambitious than differentiating his administration from Biden's. He is not trying to win approval from the mainstream media. He takes their opposition for granted. His real goal is to sustain public support for his bold agenda. He wants to use that support to corral congressional Republicans and keep Democrats on the defensive. Let's keep it real here. So far, it's working. Democratic confusion and weakness has helped. Still reeling from the loss in November, they lack a positive program. They lack a compelling vision. They lack leaders. They lack spokesmen. The more moderate order generation has disappeared. The most visible and voluble media faces are the most left-wing strident types. That might be a winning stance in Connecticut. It's a loser in Kansas. It will not help win back the swing states that Trump captured in 2024. Democrats have lost the messaging wars in another way. They've repeatedly taken the unpopular side on high-profile issues such as closing the border, deporting illegal aliens, barring men from women's sports, slashing the size of federal agencies. Right? You can't build a winning coalition by embracing consistently the 20% side of 80-20 issues. The Trump team is constantly on the air, hammering home its views. Take Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, skipped the entire Washington News Corps, posted a brief video online on the need to build a lethal fighting force, deter wars, cut administrative bloat. It was a polished, effective presentation. He promises many more. His colleagues are doing the same thing, setting a pattern future administrations are likely to follow. This kind of transparency limits the power of the mainstream media, limits the power of the elite journalists, who used to be the main pathway between the government and the public. We are now witnessing a wholesale change in how senior officials connect to voters and how journalists cover them. The Trump administration is the first to grasp this change and to take advantage of it. The trillion-dollar question is whether their policies will work out as well as their marketing.
So Voice of America, we've been around for 83 years. We started off as a radio broadcaster that broadcasts information about the war in America, behind Nazi lines during World War II. We became a television broadcaster. Now, increasingly, we are a global digital platform. We have about 360 million either viewers, listeners, people who engage with us on social media. We publish in 49 different languages. We're really a very significant news operation. It's important to say we don't broadcast in the United States. We're prohibited by law from broadcasting in the United States. And really, our most important markets today are countries like China, Iran, Venezuela, Africa. And really, our mission, to put it bluntly, is to kind of tell the story about America to the world and to tell it in a factually balanced way. That actually is in the VOA charter, and that is what our roughly 1,400 journalists try to do every day.
Are you still the head of Voice of America?
I think on paper, I'm still the head of Voice of America. What happened is that the president had an executive order. Well, first of all, let me just back up for a second. So the president announced in December that he wanted Carrie Lake to become the head of Voice of America. Certain things have to happen legally for her to be installed. I've sort of made it clear that I see myself as a caretaker. I'm happy to, be helpful to her as she takes on these.
Okay, so let's get back to Charles Lipson. He mailed out some additions to this column. Trump's team is the first to exploit tech changes in media. The president and senior officials rely on new channels, especially podcasts and social media. They go live to avoid editors. They speak to voters directly, plainly, without apology, and they limit the power of journalists. Right, so this bloke here, he is Michael Aramowitz. He is a friend of the host here, Mark Alperin.
Responsibilities. That's a genuine thing, Mark. You know me. I've worked in with R's and D's my whole entire life, and that's important to me. I really want to be cooperative with her. Carrie Lake is now what's called a senior advisor to the acting CEO of U.S. Agency for Global Media, which is our parent company or parent organization. And essentially, the president has ordered USAGM, which includes Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, which Radio Free Asia, a number of other entities. They've ordered the 7 agencies, including.
Okay, let me find the right timestamps here.
should be a target for this admin if they're going to use the federal purse as a way of instituting some kind of pressure on these institutions. And it is quite wild to watch the left, which has been at the forefront of a massive censorship regime, now try to conflate speech with actions that are actually violating the law, whether it's through the illegal encampments, the trespassing of school buildings, preventing the freedom of movement, equating that with speech after being the people who are trying to shout down conservative speakers, advocating for the Biden administration's attempts to tamp down misinformation on social media, shows just how bad faith these people are acting in.
Okay, so if only this bloke here, Michael Abramowitz, had read the book Not Born Yesterday, he would recognize that people did not evolve to be gullible. There's no evidence that the Nazis' big propaganda campaign had any effect in changing minds, no evidence that Soviet Union propaganda changed minds, no evidence that communist China propaganda changed minds. If only this poor bloke realized that we did not evolve to be gullible, he wouldn't be so crazed and passionate about funding Voice of America to try to fight misinformation.
VOA can clearly be reformed. I mean, we are in a completely, as you know, Mark, a different media environment than when VOA was really prospered during the Cold War. I think, whereas during the Cold War, our problems were, how to get information behind the Iron Curtain. Today, it's how to combat propaganda, disinformation, misinformation. I don't know what the right word is, but basically the problem that I think needs to be solved, whether you have a VOA or not, is our national security rivals like China, Iran, Russia, Venezuela. They are flooding the zone with lots of false information. And VOA.
This guy really thinks it's a national security threat to America that Russia and China are flooding the zone with false information.
VOA has traditionally been a very important source of really truly non-biased, objective, accurate news and information for people living in these other countries. I still think that's a very...
Look, I love news. I love journalism. I want to be a journalist since 8th grade. But people lead perfectly good lives without referencing news. Right? News is a luxury. News will find you. You don't have to find it.
Very valuable mission. Could it be rethought, reimagined, streamlined, modernized? Absolutely. Should we throw it out entirely? No.
So these other countries you mentioned, China, Iran, they have state media that creates lots of content, both for the home audience and around the world. It seems like some part of the MAGA movement would like the function of providing counter information that reflects the American point of view to be done by the private sector. What are the chances if VOA is eliminated or scaled back to near nothing that the private sector would pump language appropriate messages into, say, China and Iran?
Right. Well, I think there are two issues. I think that's a good question. I think that there are private sector organizations that exist now that are trying to get information into these countries. So for instance, there's something called the Iran International, which I believe is funded by the Saudis or one of the Middle East, which has a very active program on Iran, which is sort of comparable, in size, I think, to VOA, maybe even a little bit bigger. They have more money than VOA, Persian network. In China, you've got private people, the New York Times, a little bit skeptical that it could be built up. Not saying things can't be done differently, but I just think that's a very unique quality of VOA, that sort of news service. And we really have really fine journalists, by the way.
So as you know, one of the ways that DOJ has operated is, and the administration is to find the weak links, to find aspects of programs that they say prove that it's not worthy of the taxpayers' money. And in some cases, that means things that they find to be left-leaning or woke. I just got texted a headline, which purports to be from a VOA story. I'm sure you've seen this already. Headline is, "What is white privilege and whom does it help?"
National security imperative for the United States, right? I remember talking.
Right. He says, I think this is a critical national security imperative, right? Funding Voice of America, right? Where he's pretty close to running the show. So yeah, people think it's imperative to fund them in important positions.
Took over. I don't believe this is a nice to have. I think this is a critical national security imperative for the United States, right?
I mean, how silly. No one believes that, right? Do you seriously think there's a national security imperative to have Voice of America out there fighting propaganda wars or fighting disinformation, misinformation against Russia and China? Right? If VOA service is so invaluable, the host countries can pick up the tab for their work. quit expecting Uncle Sam to pick up the tab. Right? I don't have to make the argument that we did not evolve to be gullible. We don't have to fear Russian propaganda and Chinese propaganda changing vulnerable minds. So, what the heck has been happening? John Podhoretz provides an excellent summary.
Things missing from this list. But I made a list of, I think, 13 things that have happened since we finished podcasting on Friday morning. Number one, shutdown averted. Chuck Schumer announces that he will support the support the continuing resolution. 9 Democrats join him. The continuing resolution, the dirty CR is passed. Democratic Party goes nuts. People are now talking about replacing Chuck Schumer. It appears the Democratic Party is going through its own version of 2009, so that's fun. A plane with Tren de Aragua members flies out of the United States. A judge named Boasberg seems to demand that it must be returned mid-flight as due process has not been achieved, while the Trump administration says that it is invoking the Enemies Act of 1798, something that most of us only know about when we studied it in history as part of one of the worst events in presidential assertion history in 1798, thus leading in part to the creation of the explicit system of checks and balances represented by the Supreme Court. Turns out, but Judge Boasberg didn't really say the plane had to be turned back mid-flight. It's that his ruling was issued while one of the 3 planes had not yet taken off. So now there's a question of whether or not it took off in contravention of its order, or if indeed the White House is obliged, or whatever the administration is obliged, to follow the order as it is put down, or to act as it thinks it must, and then to deal with the legal consequences afterward. That's a separation of powers issue. Anyway, they're now in El Salvador, these 137 people picked up under the terms of the Enemies Act, and we will see where that goes. Hamas announced the release of Adon Alexander and 4 dead Americans from the tunnels, the hostages, but it was a ruse, didn't happen. It was a PR effort to try to separate the United States from Israel in the hostage negotiations. That did not happen. In Europe, the former president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, was arrested and taken to The Hague. This is a major escalation of the powers of the International Criminal Court and this international effort to hold leaders accountable under international law, which of course has implications for Israel, among others. And so that's a very important story that has been a little undercovered. We kicked out South Africa's ambassador from the United States as part of an overall effort to make the claim that South Africa is mistreating its white minority. We then, of course, struck the Houthis. We hit, the United States hit the Houthis in Yemen in what we are told is going to be a multi-day campaign until the Houthis either stand down from attacking the shipping lanes or whatever. So there's that. Bibi Netanyahu announces that he is trying to fire the head of the Shin Bet, the intelligence service, which should be a lead pipe cinch and something that an executive who is also the head of the parliament should be able to do in a country like that. But
okay, pretty good roundup there from John Podhoretz. But how do we overcome defensiveness in relationships? I really like this this video here.
Describing my reaction rather than reacting. At the same time that I'm aware of this, it's very important for me to breathe. I need to calm myself down, because if I talk to you from a very agitated state, the best of me is not going to be communicating.
So my therapist would say, try to carry on your most important conversations when the temperature is not scalding hot.
With the best in you. I'm going to go to my lowest common denominator. You know, Herb and I have talked about how the Neanderthal seems to come out at those moments, right? I am not my best self. So I want to try to calm myself down, because I'm preparing to either fight or flight. So if I can slow down my breathing and catch myself for a moment, I'm likely to be able to regulate myself better. And
I've listened to 1,000 hours of this guy's videos. Right, he is a psychologist, a 12-step author, Alan Berger.
I can do that even at the beginning. Before I name it, I might say, I need a minute here. When I get defensive, I want to interrupt you, and I want to quibble with you about the truth. That's not what I said. What do you mean selfish? What are you talking about? I try to debate with you what's going on and try to tell you that's not the reality. But all that does is it turns our conversation into a struggle about who's right. it becomes a quibble. And that goes nowhere. So, really important, do not interrupt when you're in that state. Let your partner say whatever they need to say. Now, this is going to take you holding on to yourself a lot. Investigate. Show some curiosity at this point in time. Ask them for some specifics. Julia, you're telling me that I'm selfish. Can you share with me a specific example of that? When was the time that you saw me being most selfish, and what did that mean to you? So I show some curiosity about what she's experiencing, what's happening for her. And I try to listen to her experience rather than listening to her to make her wrong and to refute what she's saying. I'm listening to her to really try to understand what her experience is. And this is very important to stay connected, because when I get defensive, empathy goes out the window. I'm no longer able to see you. All I'm seeing is a threat, and I want to somehow deal with or reduce that threat, which is why I try to convince you that you're wrong. Next, find something to agree with. Create a collaborative atmosphere rather than a combative atmosphere. God, you're right. I can see we're on the same page, because you're not happy with me being selfish. And you know what? I don't like it when I'm selfish either. And I can see that does something to you that really damages our relationship. And I am sorry for that, because I don't want to do that. And I know at times I am selfish. Let's see if we can understand that a little bit more. So I try to get on the same page with that person in that situation. God, I can see how in that experience, that what you just described, I was selfish. I can see how you experienced me that way. I didn't think of it like that before, but I can definitely see, as we're talking about it now, that I was being selfish. God, that's hard for me to admit. Can you love a guy that's selfish at times? I start to get anxious about that. You see how the dialogue continues on around that whole subject? But by finding something that I can agree with you on and get on the same page with you on, it keeps that connection to that other person. Remember what I said, our goal here is to stay connected during trouble and add more self, instead of getting alienated from each other when there's trouble. And it's so easy to get alienated. Some more tips. Apologize for my part in it, or for your part in it. There's always something that we can own. Even if I say something like, I apologize for my part in all of this. What I'm trying to do is to maintain the connection. Now, that has to be authentic. You cannot be insincere when you do this. You can't be flippant in it. You've got to really be searching for what have I done? Am I culpable in this in some particular way? Most situations, I can find that culpability in a situation, because everything in a relationship is bilaterally determined. It doesn't mean I'm responsible for you, but I am responsible to you. And I want to take that responsibility. And my responsibility to you is to be able to own my stuff. What I've found, and I think I see this in the couples I work with, the more I take responsibility to own my stuff, the less pressure I will get from my partner. If I am deflecting, avoiding, abdicating responsibility, then my partner is going to be pointing out all kinds of ways I'm not working my program. Don't you think you need to go to more meetings, honey? Have you talked to your sponsor lately? Might be a good idea for you to go to a meeting tonight. The next tip is no buts. Don't get into a tit for tat. Don't say, yeah, you're right, I'm responsible for that. But you know what you did was, no tit for tat stuff. You clean up your side of the thing because you need to clean up your side. And do not make it a condition that they have to do the same. You need to worry about how you're functioning in a relationship, and you let them worry about how they're functioning. Don't counter criticize, and I see this maneuver taking place. Yeah, I'm selfish, but what do you think you're doing? When you go to the gym after work every day and you don't even call to see if I've got anything for dinner, I think that's friggin' selfish too. And you're on me about my selfishness? Why don't you take care of your shit, Julia? That's a counter criticism. That's what that would look like. And all that is to defend myself, right? and to deflect my taking responsibility because I'm anxious. So I'm going to try to make her wrong. So she worries about how wrong she is rather than how angry she is about me being selfish. My God, that happens. That strategy I see so often about this counter criticism. If you have a legit issue, you bring it up at another time, not when you're being criticized, because it's just a deflection. And if you got something to say and say, I want to finish this and talking about it, and maybe tomorrow I want to bring up a grievance that I've got that I'd like to deal with. I don't want to do it now because I don't want to take away from what you're saying to me. So if you got something legit, yeah, that needs to be talked about too, but not at the same time. So counter criticism just throws gasoline on the fire. It's not important to be right. So keep silent, especially when you know you're right. That's the most important time to keep your mouth shut. Let your partner know that they've been hurt. Sometimes this is all that is needed to get back into sync with someone. God, it was tough for me at first to take it in and to hear what you're saying, but I really see how upset that made you. And I'm sorry for that. I really am. I'm going to see what I can do to clean that up some more. Or I'm going to see what I can do to clean it up in our relationship. I've been trying to, but that's obviously not enough. You got any tips on what I might do? Let's kind of collaborate. Let's talk about it. Boy, this one is so important. Sit with your response. We talk all the time about finding that space between a stimulus and your reaction. And Dr. Viktor Frankl says that in that space is where you find your power to choose, where you start to grow up, where you start to establish emotional sobriety, where you find what we would call your real strength or your real power, is to be thoughtful and come up with the best possible response given the circumstance that you're dealing with. So sit with your response. Maybe even after the person brings this up and say, I need some time to really process this. Can we take a pause for a while and let me sit down? And then you got a lifeline. You call your sponsor and say, help, please. I want the best of me to do the talking for the rest of me. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do that feeling the way I am right now. If you work with me, put me on your speed dial. I mean, give me a quick call. If I'm available, I'd give you a tip if I can in a couple seconds in terms of helping you get centered and be able to best respond to the situation. But what we want to move away from is reactivity, because when you are responsive, then you are now integrating your thoughtfulness about the situation with your feelings about it. When we react, we are completely going off of our feelings. And as Dr. Nathaniel Branden reminds us all the time, feelings are not an infallible guide to the truth. Feelings are not an infallible. They're to be respected, but they're not to be given privilege. This is really important, is you thank your partner for initiating the conversation. Let them know that their turning to you is important to you because it means you're important to them. And as though it was hard for me to hear, this is what I might say to Julia if she's criticizing me about my behavior in some way. Well, while it's hard for me to hear that and for me to look at some of these things because I want to please you all the time, 100% of the time, I think that's what I have to do for you to keep your love for me. But I want you to know it means a lot to me that you're turning to me to deal with this stuff and that you haven't given up on us. And I hope you never do. Show gratitude for being uncomfortable. So much of the time, our relationships are driven by, we're good if we're in a good place and everything's going the way we want it to. But I'm here to tell you that that is not a measure of good in a relationship. It's easy to feel that way when things are going your way or when you're in sync with your partner. But the true metal of a relationship is what you do when you're out of sync and how you deal with it. And if you can deal with it in a way that does not alienate your partner from you, especially when you're being criticized, and especially when your first response is to try to make them wrong or to counter-criticize them, and you stop that, you are making a significant deposit in that emotional bank account with your partner. When it goes south and the way you respond diminishes the encounter that the person's just had with you, you've made a substantial withdrawal. And this is what Gottman found, is that when these withdrawals were taken over and over again, eventually the relationship went bankrupt. And when it went bankrupt, they ended up in divorce. So everything you do is either enhancing and making a contribution in a deposit to that emotional bank account, or you're making a withdrawal. There's no neutral. And if I appreciate, you coming to me, and as hard as it was and for hard as it was to talk about, I am making a deposit in that emotional bank account, and I'm strengthening our relationship. This is an important one too. Is sometimes it's a good idea after you guys have talked about it and say, we've had a pretty heavy talk right now. And, at first I got real defensive, and I was able to back off and, really hear what you had to say. I'd like some more time to reflect on it. How about if we come back in a couple days and revisit the topic again about my selfishness in our relationship? And let's see if I can understand it even more, because I can tell it's important to you. Most people never do that. Because of the anxiety they feel about the conversation, they don't want to come back to it. And what I am saying here is that being uncomfortable and being willing to be uncomfortable and endure that discomfort is important to create a deeper connection. You see, people ask me all the time, is there any guarantee that a relationship is going to be okay, that somebody's not going to betray the other person, and we're not going to, that we're not going to fall out of love with each other and start to really feel this contempt and dislike for that other person? What I tell them is that the process between you and your partner, the way you talk about things, is the closest thing you can come to a guarantee. Because if that process is a healthy one, it's going to keep the relationship alive and the love alive and very stimulated. There's some other things we can do about that as well. But in terms of communication, that becomes essential, is to pay attention to what is happening between us and how we manage these difficulties. So with that said, let me stop sharing my screen.
So I first went to public school in the fall of 1981. So I was sophomore, and I talked to some of the other kids about my favorite songs, my favorite Air Supply songs in particular. And I remember saying once to a group of kids, I could just listen to these songs over and over again. And this one girl said, "Why don't you buy the album?" And it's like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. I never thought of buying an album. I didn't like spending money. It didn't occur to me that I could buy an album. And then in the mail, I got one of those offers where you can have like 6-8 cassette tapes for 1 cent, but then they sign you up where they automatically send you one every month if you don't respond. So I went on a massive splurge, whatever it was, about seven cassette tapes first time. So I think I got Love and Other Bruises, Air Supply 1977, Lost in Love 1980, The One That You Loved 1981, Now and Forever. Oh, I'm choking up just remembering Now and Forever 1982. So I think I got what? How many free cassettes did you get in those? Who did that thing where you could buy, where they'd give you like 8 free cassettes, or how many free cassettes would they give you? The Publishers Clearinghouse, was it? No, what was it? 8 free cassettes for a penny in 1980s. What was the deal? Oh, 12 tapes for a penny from Columbia House. Okay, so I'd get the first 12 cost a penny, but then they would just automatically send you one every month. 8 CDs for a penny, company files for bankruptcy. But Columbia House, they would send you 12 cassette tapes for a penny, but then they'd sign you up where every month they'd send you a new one and charge you fair dinkum regular prices like $15, $12. And I didn't always return as quickly as I should have, and so I started getting the tapes and getting billed, and my mother got mad, and she said they're taking advantage of you, and she wrote them an angry letter, and they never bothered me again. Columbia Records. So So this is what I got. So I think I bought 4 Air Supply tapes. I bought Barry Manilow's Greatest Hits. Now, out of every album I listened to, I think that was the one I listened to the most. I bought Simon and Garfunkel's Greatest Hits. Peter, Paul, and Mary. And what was another group like Peter, Paul, and Mary? Lemon Tree, Very Pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat. So Peter, Paul, and Mary. I think Mamas and the Papas. I didn't want this, but somehow I got Bette Midler's The Rose album, and I only liked that one song, The Rose. And so those are the ones that I remember. And then I started working construction in 1985, and I bought a car. When did I first buy a car? Yeah, I first bought a car in the summer of 1985. It was a 1966 Volkswagen, and I ended up spending I bought the car for $1,500, and I ended up spending like $500 on an audio system, like really high quality audio system with speakers. And so then I lashed out, bought a whole bunch of CDs. I bought, what's the most famous album by the Beatles? Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Don Henley, Building the Perfect Beast. What was the In Excess album that came out around In Excess just came around 1984, so it's an Australian band. In Excess, they had Burn For You. Did they have Never Turn Us Apart? Where's the discography? Okay, The Swing. I bought The Swing by In Excess. Rock You Like a Hurricane. That was such a seminal cassette tape for me by the Scorpions. I bought that in 1984. I just play that for everyone. I loved Rock You Like a Hurricane. The Eagles, Greatest Hits. But what's that really sad song by the Eagles about some lonely town? The Eagles just, The New Kid in Town. My God, Desperado. I loved Hotel California, fine. Take It Easy, fine. Lying Eyes. I can't tell you why. That was pretty good. Take It to the Limit. That was nice. The New Kid in Town. That hit me. Love Will Keep Us Alive. Desperado. I think that's my favorite Eagles song. And then Tequila Sunrise was so heartbreaking. And I liked One of These Nights. Oh, Already Gone. Oh, the other album that I Life in the Fast Lane was good. Oh, Try and Love Again. There's going to be a Heartache Tonight. Oh, Wasted Time. That was heartbreaking. Pretty Maids All in a Row. The Long Run. After the Thrill Is Gone. After the what's the one? There's something about that they're gone off after the thrill is gone. Yeah. Is that the one where they go, same dances in the same old shoes, some habits you just can't lose? There's no telling what a man might use after the thrill is gone. But didn't they do a song about a lonely place? It's going to be a Heartache Tonight. Victor, Try and Love It. Wasted Time. That was heartbreaking. Oh my God. We hope that it wasn't. I can't spend time on that song. Wasted Time. It's too painful because I just get in these repetitive 1-year relationships. The other huge album was REO Speedwagon High Infidelity. Wow. And when I first got a girlfriend who'd have sex with me, I'd put this on and it would get her hot. High Infidelity. I love that. Don't let him go. That's fine. Keep on loving you. Follow my heart in your letter. Take It on the Run. Shaking It Loose. Out of Season. But what's the one? Tough Guys. Right. They think they're full of fire, but she thinks they're full of a bad word that starts with S and ends with T. I mean, that was so incredibly edgy. But then, like, it was just these awesome ballads. And then the last song is just heartbreaking. No, don't give me Pink Floyd. I wish you were there. Oh, I wish you were there. Right. So just rockin' songs all through REO Speedwagon's High Infidelity. And then that last song. Right? I mean, this is the motto for my show. I know a place where you can go, where you're flying high or laying low. And I've got the time. I've got plenty to spare. I've got the time, and I've got the place. I just wish you were there. I have the will to have you around, whether you're up, whether you're down. And I know the way to make you shine. I've got the will, and I've got the way. I just wish you were mine. What a heartbreaking song. Paradise Lit. Oh, the other Eagles song that killed me. Look, my girlfriends liked my music, right? I didn't have hard rocker girlfriends. I wasn't fast enough. She came from Providence, one in Rhode Island, where the old world shadows hang heavy in the air. She packed her hopes and dreams like a refugee, just as her father came across the sea. She heard about a place people were smiling. They spoke about the red man's way and how they loved the land. This song would kill me. And they came from everywhere to the Great Divide, seeking a place to stand or a place to hide. Down in the crowded bars, out for a good time. Can't wait to tell you all what it's like up there. And they called it paradise. I don't know why. Somebody laid the mountains low while the town got high. And the chilly winds blew down across the desert, through the canyons of the coast to the Malibu, where the pretty people play, hungry for power, to light their neon way, give them things to do. Some rich men came and raped the land. Nobody caught 'em. Put up a bunch of ugly boxes, and Jesus people bought 'em. And they called it paradise, the place to be. They watched the hazy sun sinking in the sea. Whew. I haven't been the same since Gene Hackman died in such a sad way. You can leave it all behind, sail to Lahaina, just like the missionaries did so many years ago. They even brought a neon sign, Jesus is coming. Brought the white man's burden down, brought the white man's rain. Who will provide the grand design? What is yours and what is mine? 'Cause there is no more new frontier. We've got to make it here. We satisfy our endless needs and justify our bloody deeds in the name of destiny and in the name of God. And you can see them there on Sunday morning, stand up and sing about what it's like up there. They call it paradise. I don't know why. Oh, you call someplace paradise, kiss it goodbye. Oh, woo. Everybody Wang Chung tonight. All right, that was fun. That was nice, but it wasn't Paradise by the Eagles. Tears for Fears, that was fine. So I fell out of touch with pop music about 1989. And then I discovered Kelly Clarkson in the 2000s. Love Kelly Clarkson. And now I'm into Avril Lavigne. Right? She is a rockin' chick. I love Avril Lavigne. And then who's that singer with the great melodies and the big natural breasts? She can really belt them out. She's got that music video about back in the day. Come on, who is it? She's just got the rockin' melodies. Oh man. And okay, let me go to my hits. So I've got my phone. I've got a playlist hits. I love Laughing With by Regina Spektor. Drive by the Cars. I think Drive by the Cars is my favorite song. Jerusalem by Vangelis. I love Chariots of Fire. I like Abraham's theme. I can't get enough of Abraham's theme, Vangelis, from Chariots of Fire. I love The Young and the Restless. Love Comes Quickly. Pet Shop Boys can really bring it. Where the Streets Have No Name, Go West. REM, Man on the Moon, all the way to Reno, Losing My Religion. Bryan Adams, Back to You. Don Henley, The Boys of Summer. Peter Allen, Tenterfield Saddler. I've got all these versions of I Still Call Australia Home. Desperado by the Eagles. Ordinary World by Duran Duran. Love that song. Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer. Oh, REO Speedwagon, I Wish You Were There. Foreigner, I Want to Know What Love Is. REO Speedwagon, Can't Fight This Feeling. Paula Cole, Where Have All the Cowboys Gone? So she's in the last 20 years. Sheryl Crow, I like her. Had a girlfriend said, you'd like Sheryl Crow. So I got her greatest hits. All I Want to Do and Soak Up the Sun. Piano Man by Billy Joel. Journey, Faithfully, Open Arms, Don't Stop Believing. Songbird by Kenny G. The Captain by Casey Chambers. Major Tom by Peter Schilling. Heroes, David Bowie. Kathy's Song, Simon & Garfunkel. That kills me. Bang, Bang, My Baby, Shut Me Down, Nancy Sinatra. Linger by the Cranberries. Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. Wow, I bought Kathy's Song twice. New Year's Day by U2. Since You've Been Gone and Because of You by Kelly Clarkson. On the Radio by Donna Summer. Abide With Me, one of my 3 favorite hymns, along with Jerusalem and, is it Nearer My God to Thee? Was that what they were playing on the Titanic when it went down? The Emotion by the Bee Gees. The Rose by Bette Midler. I love me some disco. Yvonne Elliman, If I Can't Have You. I got the Bee Gees, greatest hits, two CDs. How Deep Is Your Love? Love Peter, Paul, and Mary, Early Morning Rain. John Denver, Take Me Home, Country Roads, Rocky Mountain High. Sunshine on My Shoulders, Annie's Song. It's a Sin by Pet Shop Boys. Scorpions, No One Like You, Still Loving You, Big City Nights, Winds of Change. Bellamy Brothers, Let Your Love Flow. Miracles by Jefferson Starship. Babe by Styx. That was one of my top 5 favorite songs in the early 80s. Mr. Mister. So when I was working at the radio station, I used to cut highlights of my high school football team, and then I'd play Mr. Mister songs under them, like Broken Wings, such as when they lost in the playoffs or they didn't make it to the playoffs. I'd cut highlights from their season, and I'd have Mr. Mister playing in the background. That was one of my favorite things to do at the radio station. I play around with it here on the live streams, is that I'd cut highlights from radio broadcasts and then play my favorite pop songs underneath them. Mike and the Mechanics, All I Need Is a Miracle. The Living Years, Styx, The Best of Times. Love the Carpenters, Top of the World, Yesterday Once More, Rainy Days and Mondays, Superstar, We've Only Just Begun, They Long to Be Close to You. Katy Perry, that's the woman with the big natural breasts and the rockin' tunes, The One That Got Away. Oof, that is such a sad song. I love Bananarama and their version of More, 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 which was originally sung by a porn star. Like Venus by Bananarama. I Heard a Rumor. Love in the First Degree. Cruel Summer by Bananarama. Being Boring by the Pet Shop Boys. Love Me Some Debbie Gibson. Only in My Dreams. Lost in Your Eyes. Out of the Blue. Pet Shop Boys, Did You See Me Coming? Only Yesterday by the Carpenters. I Need to Be in Love, the Carpenters. What You Get From Love is a Love Song, the Carpenters. My favorite boy band is Libera. So I like their Vespera. Bonnie Tyler, Total Eclipse of the Heart. And Holding Out for a Hero. Heart, Who Will You Run To? Roxette, It Must Have Been Love. Cutting Crew, I Just Died in Your Arms. Boston, Amanda. Def Leppard, Love Bites. And Pour Some Sugar on Me. Love Katy Perry's Hot and Cold. Kelly Clarkson's Already Gone. I like the theme song to The Deuce, This Year's Girl. Forgotten the original artist. Gloria Estefan, Words Get in the Way, Can't Stay Away from You. Kim Wilde, You Keep Me Hanging On. Leaving New York by R.E.M. Left Outside Alone by Anastasia. So Curious Gazelle introduced me to Anastasia. Sick and Tired by Anastasia. Nikita by Elton John. Your Song by Elton John. Tiny Dancer, Elton John. Rocket Man, Elton John. Daniel, Elton John. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Elton John. Candle in the Wind. I guess that's why they call it the blues. Elton John. Elvis Costello, This Year's Girl. Find the River by R.E.M. Words by F.R. David, the original version. Dance Monkey by Tones and I. The instrumental Rise by Herb Alpert. Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. I love The Captain of a Heart. Remember Double? They just had that one hit circa 1985, The Captain of a Heart. Oof. The Well Pennies, If Anyone Breaks My Heart, I Hope It's You. The Losing End of Distance by The Samples. So that was inspired by the Jeffrey Blaney book on Australia, The Tyranny of Distance, I believe. Cry to Heaven by Elton John. Fire and Rain by James Taylor. That came at the end of one movie. It just broke me up. Nearer My God. Honey Honey by ABBA. That's such a lovely song. Video Killed the Radio Star. Running by Sarah Brightman. The Cheers theme. Good Time Girl by Sophie Tucker. So that was from, I think, the new Pope. And Take This Chance. So those are my 129 songs composing 9 hours and 5 minutes from, those are my hits, man. That's my rocket fuel. Right. That's what keeps me going. Okay, what does the chat say?
Yeah, I just, taking back to like the original topic, I think I'm thrilled. Like we should, I'm confused by, I'm not confused. I'm saddened that I didn't think of stopping their grants before I thought of seizing endowments. That's what I'm frustrated by. Like, I think that I didn't think about how effective a weapon it would be to stop these grants, how core they are to the continued funding and operation of the university, and how turning off the tap can create this massive, uproar and upheaval among the faculty of the university to force the institution to change. Because you keep this up, all those faculty are going to move to different universities, and these aren't necessarily the political faculty. These are like the science and the math and the physics and all the hard stuff that you get federal grants for. But I think it's a great idea to say, look, if you want to be attached to an institution that behaves this way, you don't get any federal funding for your research. Go somewhere else. And I think that's a really good way for the federal government to drive the sort of behavior we want out of these universities and make them take their obligations to their students seriously.
Just to slap some.
So I have so many happy memories from my first 3 years in Los Angeles before I started blogging about Dennis Prager and lost all my friends. And I used to go on Saturday mornings to Stephen S. Wise Temple with Dennis Prager, and we do a lot of the prayers and then a lot of the singing after lunch to Debbie Friedman tunes. And I just love Debbie Friedman. I mean, just a fantastic singer. She means so much to me. I've got like many of her albums. She was a singer in the Reform movement, and I have an Orthodox friend who's not a big Debbie Friedman fan, and he'd describe her as the leading left-handed crippled lesbian singer of her generation. And I thought that was hilarious. But I love her singing. But I have repeated that very nasty remark, the leading left-handed crippled lesbian singer of her generation. But I love Debbie Friedman. What's wrong with me that I repeat this nasty remark when I love me some Debbie Friedman? So I've got a playlist that's just sleep. So when I can't sleep, I was just letting it run last night. Agnes Die by Samuel Barber. Let Your Love Flow. So I've got the softer stuff, not the Scorpions. Linger by the Cranberries. And lots of Debbie Friedman. And I just let it play all night. But how could I say such a horrible thing like what my friend said, the leading left-handed lesbian singer of her generation? And I love her music. And I also love Snottom Kaur. I love Longtime Sun. May the longtime sun shine upon you and all love surround you. I was really into Kundalini yoga for a couple of years. And by thy grace. I love Colts, man. I just love me some Colts. Luke's musical taste leave me mostly baffled like word salad in a ballad. I love what I love. Like, I don't even care if the lyrics say the opposite of what I believe. If the combo of the lyrics and the music choke me up, like the song Imagine, it chokes me up. I don't agree with the lyrics, but it does something to me. It just hits me. So I've got 150 songs, 10 hours on my sleep playlist. But I mean, I need music, man. When I'm feeling down or I just need energy, music makes everything better. And my only criteria is, do I love it?
Some numbers on that. It's about $50 billion a year in grants annually to the university system. Like I said, Columbia's grants tend to be between $800 and $900 million every single year. This is just for research. And then, like I said, they're completely dependent on the student loan fund. So that's another huge part of their budget. Every time, a student takes out one of these federally backed loans, that's money that they could not have gotten, in many cases from a bank. And so that also comes with strings attached to it. But a lot of these grants are, I think this is one of those things, just like with USAID. Once people start to hear what a lot of these grants are for, because people immediately think science, cancer funding. No, we're talking about $700,000 to UPenn to study how to allocate COVID vaccines on the basis of race. Okay. And there's also just huge overhead in these grants. So it used to be that Congress capped, overhead costs, indirect costs of the research. It used to be capped at 8%. Now it's 60%. So you can request 60% more money on top of what you say the research costs for quote unquote overhead costs, right? For administrative costs. I mean, it is.
I think this woman's name is Inez Stepman, and she brings it, man. She bangs in a positive way, a respectful way.
It's a giant slush fund, and like every one of these bureaucratic giant slush funds, it's been going to leftist causes for many, many decades. So this is a welcome move, and I think there's a lot more to come and a lot more to discover where that's at. But
yeah, let's stop sending out taxpayer money to the left.
We're going to go ahead and move on to the next subject, which is to talk about Lawfare 2.0 and how conservatives are fighting back.
So I think last week we might have talked a little bit about this decision out of the D.C. District Court where Judge Amir Ali issued a non-appealable temporary restraining order, a universal injunction that unfroze the Trump administration's pause on foreign aid assistance and required that it pay out allegedly owed funds of an estimated $2 billion to everyone impacted by that order, not just the plaintiffs that were party to the case. And this has sort of become representative of the 100+ cases that have been lodged against the Trump administration, seeking to stymie and thwart some of its most fundamental and core executive actions. And there have been any number of zany rulings associated with it. And in this case, the Supreme Court basically refused to step in and overturn that restraining order, went back to the judge and said, you got to give more detail, and it has to be something that the government can comply with, essentially. And that's still being adjudicated, and there's going to be a push for a preliminary injunction there, then that'll get appealed, and the lawyers here can talk about how this ultimately ends up at the Supreme Court probably again. But in the wake of the way in which Democrat attorneys general and activist groups and organizations have judge shopped and forum shopped to take these cases and seek out universal injunctions, there are those who think, and I count myself among them, that while the Supreme Court lets cases ripen and takes its time, the judiciary is rotting. And there has to be a question of how much what the tolerance is of SCOTUS, and if the cost of that tolerance is such that there needs to be more immediate action taken.
I don't love every episode that they do, right? I don't play this much from the National Conservatism YouTube channel, but this particular episode I thought was superb.
Universal injunctions where a court prohibits, in this case, the federal government from continuing an activity, not just that supposedly harms one group, but prohibits it against everyone, everywhere, is something that's been heavily debated for a long time. It's a relatively new phenomenon in the law, again, as the lawyers can speak to. And Supreme Court, several justices, namely Justice Thomas and Gorsuch.
Look, I want to be clear. I don't sob, right? I can't remember the last time I sobbed, right? I just have just tiny trickles of tears because my feelings are so exquisite. But I'm not walking around sobbing, guys.
Have called for the court to take up the question of their legality. The court hasn't. In fact, the Biden administration, which only got hit with 14+ universal injunctions, versus Trump 1, which was hit with over 60 universal injunctions, more than half of all issued over the last 60 years. Even the Biden administration asked the Supreme Court to rule on their lawfulness and endorse the views of Thomas and Gorsuch. But while the court dithers and takes its time on this issue, the very day that the Supreme Court failed to overturn Judge Ali's temporary restraining order, in Congress, there was activity to take on and curtail universal injunction. So Congressman Darrell Issa brought a bill before the House Judiciary.
Okay, it's been a pretty good crowd for a Monday. The